Mexico sweltered under a sun that made the streets shimmer like a dream on the edge of breaking. In towns scattered across the countryside, people still whispered the name of a man who had become more legend than flesh, El Mariachi. Stories of his three-string guitar, the weaponized case he carried, and the blood he had spilled had traveled far beyond the borders of small cantinas. Some said he had vanished into the desert, others claimed he had died. But even myths breathe, and the myth of El Mariachi was about to be dragged once again into the violent machinery of politics, revenge, and betrayal. It began with a man named Sands, a CIA operative whose bland surface barely concealed the chaotic intentions beneath. He moved like someone who believed the world was a game board he alone understood. Sands had been in Mexico long enough to know that a storm was coming, one stitched together from corruption, rebellion, and old grudges. A cartel led by the vicious General Marquez was planning a coup against the Mexican president, and Sands wanted to manipulate the entire event to further his own agenda. He needed someone deadly, someone motivated, someone who could not be controlled but could be nudged into the right direction. For that, he sought out El Mariachi. El Mariachi, however, was not the mythical gunslinger Sands imagined. He was a man carrying the weight of unbearable loss. He lived far from the chaos now, with memories too sharp to forget. He had once fought alongside the beautiful and fierce Carolina, a woman whose courage matched his own. Their love was fierce, burning bright against a world of violence, but tragedy had smothered it. General Marquez, driven by cruelty and by orders from powerful cartel overlords, had murdered Carolina and their young daughter. That act had turned El Mariachi from a wandering musician into a ghost filled with fire. To Sands, this grief was a tool. To El Mariachi, it was a wound that never closed. When Sands finally tracked him down, he found a man living in quiet solitude, though his guitar case still held more weapons than music. Sands presented the mission like a performance. Marquez was planning to attack the president during the Day of the Dead celebrations. Sands wanted Marquez stopped, but not before the general fulfilled the cartel's request to kill the president. Sands hoped to destabilize the cartel by allowing them to believe their plan had succeeded, which would then make it easier to manipulate the aftermath. But he needed someone to disrupt the situation in a way that only a living legend could. Sands offered El Mariachi the chance to confront Marquez, to end the man responsible for his family's death. It was not justice, it was a lure. El Mariachi accepted. Not for Sands, but for himself, for Carolina, for the daughter he could no longer hold. And as he prepared for the coming storm, memories of his past returned like wounds torn open again. He remembered walking beside Carolina through crowded markets, sharing quiet jokes, dreaming of a life untouched by gunfire. He remembered the day Marquez's soldiers came, burning everything, tearing his family away. Those moments lived behind his eyes, shaping every breath he took. Sands simultaneously pulled strings across the city. He contacted Barrio, a cartel boss staging the coup in alliance with Marquez. Sands pretended to work with him while secretly plotting to destroy him. Barrio, however, was just as deceptive. He hired a retired FBI agent named Ahadras for protection, though Ahadras had her own reasons for moving through Barrio's world. Sands also hired Jorge, a man with nothing to lose, to follow and eventually assassinate Barrio after the political chaos settled. Each of Sands' plans relied on betrayal, and every betrayal carried its own blade. Meanwhile, a former hitman named Lorenzo, once a rival, later an ally of El Mariachi, was pulled into the conflict. Lorenzo had tried to leave behind the world of guns and vengeance, but loyalty to El Mariachi brought him back into the fray. Another companion, Lorenzo's cousin Fideo, a drunken but deadly sharpshooter, also joined them. The trio had once carved their names into Mexico's criminal underbelly, and now they prepared to do it again. Not for glory, but to restore a balance long shattered. Back in the city, Sands found himself juggling too many moving parts. His paranoia grew. He became entangled with a local woman, Ida, who seemed innocent, yet Sands never truly trusted anyone. His instincts proved right. Barrio discovered Sands' manipulations, and his men captured him. What followed was brutal. They blinded Sands, leaving him staggering through the streets, helpless yet unwilling to give in to death. Even without sight, Sands' twisted confidence remained. With blood dripping from where his eyes had been, he fought for survival, stumbling through alleys, relying on sound, memory, and sheer stubbornness. The fall of a man so sure of his own superiority seemed inevitable, yet Sands refused to become another corpse. As the Day of the Dead festivities approached, the atmosphere in Mexico grew electric. Streets filled with skeleton masks, marigold flowers, drums, and laughter. Underneath the celebration, however, an eruption waited. The president prepared for a public appearance, unaware of the storm closing around him. Marquez and his soldiers positioned themselves to strike. Barrio navigated the city, confident that the coup would bring him power. And El Mariachi, Lorenzo, and Fideo slipped through the crowds, ready for the inevitable explosion of violence. When the attack began, it unfolded like a dance choreographed by chaos. Marquez's men stormed the presidential palace, firing into the air, scattering civilians. Soldiers rushed to defend the president. Explosions rocked the streets. Amid the madness, El Mariachi emerged with his guitar case, unleashing a hail of gunfire that turned the tide. His movements were fluid, each step marked by purpose. Lorenzo and Fideo fought alongside him, taking down squads of Marquez's men. The trio worked with a rhythm as old as their friendship. Marquez finally spotted El Mariachi and froze, confronted by the ghost he had believed long buried. Fear flickered through the general's eyes before anger replaced it. He ordered his men to kill the musician. But destiny had already chosen the outcome. In a fierce confrontation, El Mariachi cornered Marquez among the ruins of a courtyard. Memories of Carolina and their daughter surged within him, and with a gunshot that echoed like thunder, he ended Marquez's life. The revenge that had driven him for years settled into a cold, hollow satisfaction. Elsewhere, Barrio attempted to escape. Jorge, acting on Sands' earlier instructions, pursued him relentlessly. But Barrio had anticipated betrayal and wore a disguise, a surgical transformation meant to conceal his identity. The deception twisted the confrontation into confusion, yet in the end, Barrio's empire collapsed. His plots, his coup, his men, all fell apart in the face of the chaos Sands had secretly orchestrated. The city consumed him, leaving nothing but dust and insignificance. Sands, still blind, found refuge through sheer will in the unexpected loyalty of a young boy he had once tipped generously. The boy guided Sands through the battle-scarred streets, helping him survive long enough to witness the final collapse of the coup attempt. Sands, a man of manipulation, brutality, and arrogance, was reduced to a broken figure leaning on a child. Yet even blind, he managed to kill a Hadras when she attempted to finish him. He walked forward with no clear destination, surviving through instinct more than purpose. With Marquez dead, the president saved, and the coup thwarted, the smoke finally cleared. The Day of the Dead festivities resumed, mixing celebration with the scent of gunpowder. Lorenzo and Fideo disappeared into the crowd, perhaps returning to their solitude or perhaps waiting for the next call to arms. Sands vanished into the labyrinth of the city, unchanged yet forever marked. And El Mariachi walked away from the ruins, carrying the ghost of Carolina in his heart, but with the faint suggestion that perhaps, after so much killing, peace might no longer be an impossible dream. He left the city not as a legend, not as a myth, but as a man who had lost everything and yet continued to move forward. His boots stirred up dust on the empty road. His guitar case hung at his side. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard Carolina's laughter, light as wind chimes in a forgotten church. He followed the road not because he sought glory or vengeance, but because it was the only path left. The sun dipped low, bathing the horizon in gold. El Mariachi paused for a moment, taking in the stillness. Mexico remained turbulent, unpredictable, filled with men like Sands, like Barrio, like Marquez, men who thrived on power. But there were also people worth fighting for, people who brought music into the world despite the gunfire. El Mariachi, once a musician, had become a symbol of both. He had carried violence for so long that he feared he would never again find a place where music could live. But as the desert wind brushed his fingers, he imagined strumming his guitar not as a weapon, but as an instrument of life again. The road stretched on, a promise of new stories to be written, new wounds to heal, or perhaps new battles to face. Though the legend of El Mariachi would continue to grow in the whispered tales of cantina drunks and wide-eyed children, the man himself simply moved forward, step after step, into the endless Mexican dusk.